Immersion was undeniably the mode of baptism for 13 centuries. Protestant and Catholic historians have clearly spoken on this subject. In this next round of videos, we shall let the Pedobaptists speak for themselves as to how the churches in the Apostles' time and for ages afterwards baptized.
I will introduce a few of the representative historians with a statement by Professor L. Payne, Doctor of Divinity, who occupies the chair of ecclesiastical history in the Bangor Theological Seminary. Now, this man is a Congregationalist, which means he baptizes infants. Now, this is his defense against the charge of teaching the young ministers under his tuition Baptist sentiments.
Because he teaches them that immersion was the universal practice of the apostolic churches for 13 centuries after Christ, and the prevailing practice of Christendom, sprinkling being the exception.
It may be honestly asked by some, was immersion the primitive form of baptism? And if so, what then? As to the question of fact, the testimony is ample and decisive. No matter of church history is clearer. The evidence is all one way, and all church historians of any repute agree in accepting it. We cannot claim even originality in teaching it in a congregational seminary, and we really feel guilty of a kind of anachronism in writing an article to insist upon it. It is a point on which ancient, medieval, and modern historians alike have no controversy. Catholics, Protestants, Lutherans, and Calvinists agree.
And the simple reason for this unanimity is that the statements of the early church fathers are so clear, and the light shed upon these statements from the early customs of the church is so conclusive,
that no historian who cares for his reputation would dare to deny it, and no historian who is worthy of the name would wish to. There are some historical questions concerning the early church on which the most learned writers disagree, but on this one, of the early practice of immersion, the most distinguished antiquarians, such as Bingham, Augusti, Coleman, Smith, and historians such as Mosheim, Gieseler, Haze, Neander, Milman, Schaff, and Alzog, who's a Catholic, hold a common language. The following extract from Coleman's Antiquities very accurately expresses what all agree to. Quote, in the primitive church, immersion was undeniably the common mode of baptism. The utmost that can be said of sprinkling in that early period was, in the case of necessity, it was permitted as an exception to a general rule. This fact is so well established that it is needless to adduce authorities in proof of it. End of quote. As further testimony that sprinkling is an innovation upon the primitive act, I quote a sentence from Dr. Schaff's Apostolic Church. He is the highest Presbyterian authority in America. As to the outward mode of administering this ordinance, immersion and not sprinkling was unquestionably the original, normal form. But while immersion was the universal custom, an abridgment of the rite was freely allowed and defended in cases of urgent necessity, such as sickness and approaching death. And the peculiar form of sprinkling thus came to be known as clinical baptism, or the baptism of the sick. And hence, it is difficult to determine with complete accuracy just when immersion gave way to sprinkling as the common church practice. The two forms were employed, one as the rule, the other as the exception, until, as Christianity traveled northward into colder climates, the exception silently grew to be the rule.
This is my introduction to the testimony of Pedobaptist historians. In future videos, we shall examine the statements of the scholars and historians of each leading Pedobaptist sect. So hang tight, friend. There's more to come.